Rugby Championship, the second match this weekend, folks, sees the Wallabies hosting the Pumas. Both teams had kind of a bad start to the competition and will be looking to bounce back in the second round. We'll go through the lineups, some recent history between the sides, some stats, predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one may be going to go. But yeah, like I said, neither side's going to look back to last week and have too much to smile about. I guess if you're the Pumas, at least, you had a pretty decent second half. And if you're the Wallabies, you had Carter Gordon coming on at the end and scoring a try, which at least kind of gave you a little bit of hope for the future. But it's all about the present, and both sides, interestingly, have made a number of changes. Now, the recent history between the sides is kind of Australia's way, but it's bookended by a draw 5 games ago at this same stadium in Sydney, and then the most recent result is an Argentina win over in Argentina last year, which was a whopper 48-17, but which bounced back from a 41-26 defeat the week before. Because remember, last year in the Rugby Championship, we had New Zealand in South Africa for 2 games and Australia in Argentina for 2 games, kind of back-to-back. So it wasn't kind of the standard format with the Rugby Championship at that point. So, yeah, overall, those 3-1 and a draw. In terms of the recent history, with the Aussies edging the average score, which kind of makes sense. Speaking of the Aussies, they have made a few changes. It's the same front row, though, with Slipper, Porecki, and Alaalatoa. Slipper was busy last week, as kind of the captain should be, made 13 tackles. I think he was the top Aussie tackler, so he was certainly a very busy guy. Richie Arnold is promoted to start alongside Will Skelton, so that is a big second row. In terms of pure size, that's have to be one of the biggest we've ever seen. These guys are both very tall and very heavy men in that second row, but there are some changes to the back row with Holloway coming in at 6, McReight is in at 7, and Valetini is there at 8. So Valetini is stable, and he got more pay kind of with his defensive game last week, making 11 tackles than his ball running game, but the Aussies just didn't have bugger all possession last week, and McReight's had to come in for an injured Michael Hooper. Apparently it's not serious, but why risk him if it's not like, a World Cup final kind of thing? If it's I want to say just a Rugby Championship match, then you bring in your replacement. And Fraser McReight, in terms of Super Rugby form, was the Form 7 in Australia. So I'm pleased that he gets a crack. And then Jed Holloway perhaps kind of strengthens the Aussie line out a little bit because he had Frost doing most of the ball work in the air last week. So with no Frost, having Jed Holloway there is another genuine line-out option. Just gives them another target, basically, at line-out time. For the backs, you got Nick White, Quade Cooper, that's same. Eddie was kind of asked about, did you consider Carter Gordon for the starting role after his role from the bench? Eddie basically said, it's a different game to start than to, come on at the end. He used a cricket analogy, but basically, it's kind of easy enough to come in when there's no pressure on and look good. It's a different story to start things, and he kind of insinuated that Quade would have been able to do the same last week if he'd just kind of come on towards the end of the game. But yeah, so it's an experienced 19 combo, and Carter Gordon is still there on the bench, but clearly Eddie wants to kind of build that experience into Gordon. Kerevi gets promoted to the starting lineup ahead of Reece Hodge, and Ikitau is still there at 13. So I think that's your midfield combo in Australia, as long as Kerevi's fit. Remember, he wasn't quite fit enough to play from the starting role last week, but certainly if you're going to pick between Reece Hodge and Samu Kerevi at 12, you're going to pick Samu Kerevi 100 times out of 100, basically. Nawaqanitawase also comes in on the right wing for Vunivalu, who had a bit of a nightmare performance last week. It certainly wasn't only about him, but yeah, he was shown to be perhaps not quite up to scratch, and Koroibete there on the left, and then Tom Wright is still there at fullback. So as I said, quite a few changes to the Aussie side, and they've also gone with a 6-2 split for Uelese, Bell, and Fa'amosili. So 2 new props, and Angus Bell, who's had a long time out injured as well, and the big ball carrying unit that is Fa'amosili. Matt Phillips back in, we haven't seen him for a long time. Rob Leota, likewise, haven't seen him for ages. And then Josh Kemeny will get his debut if he comes on in the 21 jumper. The 2 backs are Tate, McDermott, and Carter Gordon. So yeah, they'll have to jig things around if there are injuries to certain positions, I guess. But I mean, Tom Wright can cover the wings if need be, but you wouldn't want Samu Kerevi to go down early in that game with that bench. But yeah, apparently Quade Cooper's going to do the goal kicking this week in the absence of Reece Hodge as well. They basically said that it was the distance that was the reason Hodgie was going for the kicks last week. But anyway, for the Pumas, they've also made a few changes. And I do like the look of the front row better when Cordella is playing. He's come in at tight head. He's getting on. He's in his late 30s as old Francisco Cordella, but absolutely the Argentinian scrum looks far, far better when that guy's in there. So that's good news for Argentina. Montoya, who made 13 tackles last week, still hooker and captain. And then Gajo, who put in a couple of offloads and had a good tap and go. He's still there at loose head. So is that your best front row for Argentina? I like Gajo, so I think so. Cordella there for a scrummaging. Gajo's scrummaging is getting better, and his around the park stuff's amazing. And Montoya is just an absolute workhorse, so one of the best hookers in the world. So I think that's maybe it. Alemano and Lavanini continue on in the second row. Matera, Grondona, and Juan Martin Gonzalez are 6, 7, and 8 respectively. That's a bit of a different one. I don't remember Gonzalez playing number 8, but I could be wrong. He's usually on one of the flanks. And Matera's the only guy who kind of keeps his jersey number in the back row. Grondona gets promoted, whereas Bruni drops to the bench. And Bruni did a bunch of ball carrying, but from what I could make out of the translated press conference that Checa had in Spanish, he basically said he wanted to give some guys a chance, and Facundo Isa's not quite ready, so it's a good chance to basically rotate and give different guys different opportunities. But I mean, realistically, Matera was your guy doing most of the carrying last week in terms of pure number of carries, and Bruni was your main guy for getting over the line. So someone's going to have to fill that void that Bruni was filling last week, but you've got the talent there to do it in the likes of Gonzalez and Matera and Grondona. Bertranu and Carreras, that's your 19 combo, so same as last week. Carreras did a decent amount of carrying as far as the 10s go. De La Fuente is back into the team at 12, and Cinti shifts to 13. Cinti is still the guy I'm not sold on in the midfield for Argentina. But in terms of like the guys you got De La Fuente, you got Orlando, you've got Moroni. All these guys are kind of getting up there in age. Chocobates has not yet made the side this tour. Remember, he missed last year with injury. But, I mean, Cinti's the kind of youngest of the bunch, so I get why they're playing him. I just want to see him kind of take a step forward, because I've seen him play well for London Irish. But, yeah, it's a new midfield, and neither guy had that jersey number on their back last week. I mean, De La Fuente didn't even play. And then on the wings, Mateo Carreras, who was genuinely one of the bright spots, continues on the left wing, made a bunch of carries and beat some defenders, which was promising. And then the sevens guy, who I don't know much about, but people tell me he's bloody amazing, Rodrigo Iscaro, is on the right wing. So I look forward to seeing that guy get into some 15s. And, his battle up against Marika Koroibete should be a pretty fascinating one. Boffelli continues on at fullback. Replacements, Kerevi, Titus, Chaparro, and Bejo. Those are your front row replacements. So Titus Chaparro comes into the 23. It's a good experience guy to have as well. Polos is your genuine lock replacement this week. Remember last week they kind of had two loose forwards who could play lock. And Bruni, as I mentioned, drops to the bench. Bazan Valles, Sanchez, and Moroni. Those are your back replacements. So it's a more traditional 5-3 split for the Pumas. Stats-wise for the teams, I mean, there was a lot going wrong last week. I mean, the Argentinian lineout was at 75%, which is bad. The Aussies were at 80%, which is a bit better, but they would also like that to be improved. Both sides copped yellow cards, so that's not good news. The Argentinian scrum was at 67%, hence why I think the introduction of Cordella will be vital. The Aussies kicked more from hand, but geez, they didn't have much ball. They were often having to kick just to get out of dodge. But they did concede a lot more clean breaks, did the Aussies. But they also managed to generate more clean breaks. So the Argentinians didn't quite get cut open as much, but they also didn't manage to cut the All Blacks open as much, if that makes sense. So the Argentinians will need to sharpen up their attack, and likewise the Wallabies on defence. So, the Aussies scored one of their tries from turnover ball at the line-out, and one of them from a kick. So it'll be interesting to see the Aussies kind of build up to a try, if you know what I mean. But I mean, I guess a kick can be certainly a build-up as well, but it still felt a little bit kind of heads-up rugby. But anyway, 27-23 is the average score between the sides across the last 5 games. As I mentioned, the Aussies have won the lion's share of them. 3 of the 5 have been played in Australia, though, and 2 of them in Argentina. So take that for what it's worth. Predictions-wise, the bookies are saying the Aussies by 9 points, and the Rugby Forecast algorithm is saying by 11. So they are predicted to be more than a try better than the Pumas for this one. It is at a CommBank Stadium in Sydney, 7:45, a local kickoff, which is like 9:45 for those of us in New Zealand. So it's a slightly late one, but nothing too bad. Jaco Piper is the ref. Later on in the week, after the games are all done, you can tune into a podcast, Tony and I, on 2 Cents Gets Distracted. We talk all things rugby championship and just all things rugby generally. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link there to last week's episode where we talked about the All Blacks and the Springboks getting some smashing results. But yeah, it is all about the Wallabies in Argentina. You guys let us know your thoughts on how this one's going to go. Aussies too good at home, or check in with a bit of that Aussie inside knowledge to get the job done. You guys let us know your thoughts, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon.